Welcome to Codista Fashion Week. We're so excited to have you join us. We have a lot of participants coming throughout the program from the US and internationally, and we're just so grateful that you're spending your time with us, especially your weekend. And we will go ahead and get started. So just a couple of reminders before we begin. If you have any questions throughout the duration of the session, you can go ahead and DM one of our members, and they will have a Codisa banner, as you can see behind me. You can just ask them your question. And throughout the session, you want to make sure to keep your mic muted unless you're asking a question during the Q&A, because we do want to be respectful towards the audience as well as towards the panelists, and we want to use our full time and focus towards them. And lastly, if you haven't already, you should go check us out on Instagram at Codista, where you can find highlights of this event and others as well. And finally, I would like to introduce our panelists for today. Unfortunately, one of them had to leave at the last moment, so they will not be coming today. But today we will be speaking with Erica Sill and Maddie Zhang. Erica is a fashion and lifestyle content creator from Montreal, Canada. She's currently an engineering student at the University of Pennsylvania and hopes to break down the stereotypes surrounding women in STEM by vlogging her pastimes. And Maddie is a recent MIT grad and software engineer with previous internships at Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, and Morgan Stanley. She's passionate about altruistic causes with technology, specifically regarding outreach and mentorship to underrepresented groups in STEM and making healthcare more accessible to all. In her free time, she loves exploring fashion, working out, singing, and watching way too many cat videos. So thank you, Erica and Maddie, for joining us, and we will now get started. All right, so just to start off, even though I did introduce you two, it would be great if you could introduce yourselves in general and how you enter the world of social media.
Okay, I'll go first. So hi everyone, my name is Erica. I'm a student at UPenn. I'm studying systems engineering, but I'm currently on a gap year because of COVID. So I'm currently working as a mobile developer for a startup in Montreal, which is my hometown. And I got started with social media because of quarantine. I was on TikTok like everyone else was, and I posted K-pop dance covers because that's a club I'm involved in at school, and I want to keep that going as it was basically my only form of exercise. So yeah, that's how I got started, and I feel like my content is always evolving. So yes.
Yeah, really excited to be here. So I'm Maddie. I'm a recent grad, so I actually graduated in February 2020. So I don't really know how Zoom works. I skipped Zoom University. I am currently a software engineer at Google. So I guess for social media, growing up, I didn't really have social media. Like I got like Facebook like a couple years later than everyone else. And then I guess I got Instagram like 2 years ago. So also a couple years after everyone else. And I actually am like the only person who doesn't have TikTok probably at this point. But yeah, like I started liking Instagram, and basically I started following a bunch of accounts that like basically with women in STEM and helping like outreach and things like that. So I was like, oh, like maybe I should gear my account a bit toward that because I have some thoughts on it and I have some expertise helping out with STEM outreach events at MIT and before. So I decided it was the perfect medium for me to try to continue those efforts. So yeah, really nice, really excited to be here and really excited to meet everyone.
Yeah, and just kind of shifting from that. So with social media, how did your interest in fashion really emerge? What made you want to choose social media over other platforms to showcase this interest?
I can go first. So I guess I always have had an interest in fashion, mostly because I don't know, like, you know, clothes are nice, and I really do like planning my outfits and things like that. Ironically, I think quarantine, I actually spent more time thinking about outfits because I went like, you know, online shopping a lot and like on Depop and on like websites. So that allowed me to put more of a focus on that, I guess. And because I feel like at school, I was oftentimes too busy to really like think about fashion or about what I was wearing. I wear a lot of like, career fair t-shirts that I got for free when I was like interviewing for jobs and things like that. And yeah, the reason why I chose Instagram specifically, again, is because I saw a lot of other accounts that were doing something similar, like it's like both STEM outreach as well as like STEM and fashion. So I decided, oh, like, this seems like it's a good medium to start off, I guess. And yeah, like I got a lot of inspiration from some of those accounts as well on Instagram. Yeah.
So for me, to be honest, I had a lot of trouble finding my personal style growing up, especially in high school, because I was very influenced by, I guess, the trend and everyone going for streetwear, which personally I just don't look good in, and it wasn't really my style. So it wasn't until I found TikTok and kind of got exposed to fashion TikTok where, people are always showcasing what they wear and it's always so different. And I also began seeing a lot of people doing DIY fashion that I really got into it, and I found that confidence to express myself. And I feel like through social media and especially Instagram, it's a great networking tool to meet people with similar interests. And basically, I started interacting with more accounts that had similar interests and also style. And that's how I really found my personal style. And yeah, I continued to share on social media because that was a platform that inspired me. So I thought it only made sense to continue there.
Hi everyone. I'm Yasmin. So it was really interesting hearing how both of you guys use social media to get into fashion and combining it with STEM. So as a member of Gen Z, what is your perspective on how fashion ties in with self-expression?
So I guess I can go first now. So for Gen Z, I feel like it's different than other generations. I feel like we're very unapologetic with what we wear and we're always ready to try new things. Like even during quarantine, you see people are cutting their own hair, they're dyeing the fronts of their strands. So in previous generations, I feel like there was a very distinct trend. Whereas now, you walk on the street and you'll see people wearing whatever they like. There's some girls that just rock a style that I could never do. And, everyone's different.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with what Erica said. I think what does make us different is, yeah, like the fact that there are so many different styles out there that even though there's like no like, general trending style, as I believe in previous generations, like everyone has the ability to express themselves in whatever style they want. And I do agree that like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube allows a lot of people to showcase their personal style. And for sure, yeah, there's like definitely like I think I have a very specific style that I show, but there are so many other people who can completely kill it in other styles, and it's amazing to be able to see that like on my feed and things like that. So yeah, self-expression.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Social media has definitely played a large role in, I guess, influencing a lot of trends and how people dress. Um, So moving on to like the beauty industry. So the beauty industry definitely plays a large role, I guess, in all of our lives. And it obviously isn't perfect. And there's definitely a large need for social advocacy. So how do you address social issues through your platform?
Yeah, so I can start off with this. So I guess I don't have like super good I guess like stance on the beauty industry specifically because I guess I'm not I think I'm more fashion than beauty, but I can address like advocacy in general. So for me, like I mentioned, I'm pretty passionate about STEM outreach, and that's like kind of why I guess started to ramp up on my Insta. So I do a lot of outreach events, whether it be, for example, with Google, I am able to volunteer to help host their university recruiting outreach events. So that involves virtually, because of COVID, going to a lot of different universities to help out with like resume reviews or with mock interviews or with panels, especially universities that are underrepresented in terms of being represented in technology and at Google in general. So that's something that I do a lot in my free time. Also in general, university, basically at MIT, I did a lot of outreach as well, which I hope to continue with Instagram. So for example, I was part of a mentorship program where I helped teach middle school and high school girls around the Boston area how to code. I also participated in this program called Patronos Hermosos, which basically is beautiful patterns in Spanish, and made it so that I went to Aguascalientes, Mexico for a week, where I taught a curriculum that also introduced girls in there to like basic computer science concepts like searching and sorting algorithms, crypto, things like that. So that's like also something that I do. And because of Instagram specifically, I have been able to also participate in other events, I guess specifically virtual ones because of COVID. But yeah, for example, like I've also done my fair share of panels and also resume workshops and also tutoring sessions that I found through Instagram. So I'm really grateful that that has given me that those opportunities. So in general, I guess I am pretty involved when it comes to STEM outreach specifically. And in general terms of other social issues, I do try my best to keep informed with the news and with what's happening, obviously. So I'll try to post about it. I have a highlight in my stories that talks about like basically my stances on certain issues that are happening and trying to spread information about certain issues that I believe are not as prevalent in mainstream media, but that I believe are social issues that deserve more attention.
It's really inspiring to hear how much you do, because I see that like you're definitely standing around the STEM and fashion intersection, which is somewhere that I want to gear towards eventually. But at the moment, in terms of beauty, I would say definitely when I was growing up, I felt like there weren't many social influencers that were Asian, and I had a lot of difficulty figuring out how to do my own makeup, because on YouTube I would be watching, you know, this white lady putting on smoky eyeshadow, and when I tried it on myself, I don't have the right crease, and I also don't have, you know, necessarily the facial structure for that type of makeup. So through especially TikTok, I've been posting like tutorials on how I do my makeup. At the moment, I'm trying to venture into the YouTube world, but that's a little intimidating for me, especially because I don't like hearing recordings of my own voice. And in terms of social issues, I also do post, like I reshare things I feel like I need to bring an attention to, especially because a lot of my followers are of Asian descent. So I feel like it's important to spread that information. My TikTok, I just saw there's a comment on the side. It's erica.syl. And right, there was also one time where I think you guys might know, but Mulan, the movie, was recently released. And although they did hire a lot of Asian actors and actresses, behind the scenes, all of the crew was white. So that was something that I spoke about on my TikTok and yeah, brought attention to.
Yeah, I really love those responses and kind of going from the social advocacy point to a more specific problem, which you just kind of touched on, Erica. So there's clearly a lack of diversity in fashion and beauty towards certain groups of people. And how have you amplified those voices, which you kind of talked about a bit, but just to elaborate more, how do you amplify these people's voices through your social media platforms?
So through social media, I do work with brands. So oftentimes, like if I know that the brand owner is, first of all, a small business and they're a minority group, I try to be a lot more supportive, and I really try to give them that exposure through my accounts. So I would say in that sense, yeah, I just try my best to support local as well.
Yeah, to add on to that, in terms of amplifying voices, so I don't work with that many brands in general, but there are a couple of female-owned brands on Instagram. For example, like I know like Stems Chicks is making something, and Fern Suli, if you happen to follow her on Instagram, is another amazing woman in STEM who's also making like clothes. So for those, I try my best to support and buy and post about. because I think it's really important as women in STEM to kind of amplify that and show that, you know, we do exist and we can do things just as well as, you know, other people can. And I think basically being able to express that is something that is really important, and that I think that it's a really good thing. For example, like I also like shout out Coding Crystals, which is another brand started by a woman developer in New York. I think that's really a really great cause, and yeah, I definitely try my best to buy and support and to share those brands that are owned by women in STEM.
Yeah, I think those are great. And so I know a lot of both of you talked about how there like is clearly not many people to look up to and social media, especially for people of color. So when you were growing up and even now, do you have any role models that you looked up to, either in the social media phase or anyone else in general?
Yeah, so for me, I guess I wasn't super social media heavy before, I guess like 2 years ago. So I think I didn't really follow anyone in social media in general. But in terms of role models, like I definitely had some. I think I'll shout out two of them. So first one is Marie Curie, and second one is Malala, for hopefully self-explanatory reasons. But basically, for Marie Curie, I was always interested. Well, I was interested in STEM from a very, very young age, and she has always been the epitome of, you know, what I strive for as a scientist, as an engineer. Basically, I think that she has done a lot of good for the world, and she was not allowed to attend university in her, and I think in her native Poland, because they just didn't allow women then. So she actually saved up money to go to France and get her degree there, and nothing stopped her. And she obviously won a Nobel Prize. So I think she is an example of someone who fought a lot of adversity and who was a really badass woman in STEM and who accomplished awesome things despite not having equal footing. And I think that's something that especially women in STEM, should look up to. And yeah, for Malala, I guess like, yeah, it really, really, I really admire people who are able to stand up for what they believe and what they believe is right, even under like severe adversity, as obviously she was put under. So yeah, she's another person that I look forward to, that I look up to. And I hope that other girls as well will look up to people like Mary Curie and Malala, who are pioneers in trying to give more equal opportunities to women, especially in STEM.
So for me, in terms of like the fashion aspect and people that I look up to in terms of style, so recently I've really gotten into DIY clothing, and someone that I've been watching all the time on YouTube, I think she's a pretty small creator. Her name is Kiana Bonolo, and she like teaches you sewing tips and like teaches you a bunch of different tricks. And then of course, there's also, you guys have probably seen Wisdom 8 on TikTok. He's the dude who's breaking all of these fashion norms, and he's working with, you know, some really cool brands, and he's always trying to showcase that the gender norms, especially when it comes to like guys in terms of makeup, in terms of like even heels, and he's always rocking those looks. So I definitely look up to them, and I really hope that I can also bring some diversity into the fashion world. As I said, I am trying to incorporate more of my STEM life into my social media channels, especially when I go back to school next year. I'm hoping to make some vlogs on YouTube. So we'll see how that goes.
So those were some really insightful responses. So quarantine has obviously had a dramatic impact on all of our lives, and I'm curious to how your personal fashion statement has changed after staying inside for so long.
Okay, so to be honest, I'm not a big online shopper, so quarantine has been pretty hard for me. Because I like going in stores. I like feeling the material and trying it on, especially. So during quarantine, especially in Montreal, we've been on complete lockdown. Everything's closed, even clothing stores. So I've had to, you know, go back into my closet, look at pieces that I no longer wear, and try to turn them into something that I would wear nowadays. So definitely the whole DIY thrift flip upcycling thing was a hobby that I've only gotten into very recently. And I guess that's how my fashion has changed during quarantine.
That's really awesome. I think you've definitely inspired me to try to DIY, even though I have like no craft skills whatsoever of clothes that I don't really wear in my closet. But yeah, like unlike Erica, I unfortunately really love online shopping. So I think in terms of personal style, I definitely, so like I mentioned, actually like dress up more now because like, now I can take photos versus like at school, I was always really busy and always like not really doing much with my fashion style. But yeah, I definitely got like I made like a Depop account and Poshmark account during quarantine. So I've been really into trying to like find like really cool secondhand pieces from people on those platforms. So that's been really interesting and really, and I think I've gotten some like cool pieces there. Also like online shopping in general, I really like. So I've been trying to, I guess like buy more like not experimental is not the right word, but more outlandish pieces just because like if it doesn't work, like it's not like anyone will ever see me wearing it. Probably I can always test it out in my house. But I think on the day to day, my fashion style, I think I definitely gravitate a lot more toward like loungewear and a lot more toward like comfy clothes than than I used to. But I will say that comfy clothes that I gravitate toward now, like still like, stuff that I buy online or thrift online, as opposed to like the career fair t-shirts and other things that I would wear while being a student. So I think there's a still comfy, but definitely a change in terms of what I wear day to day.
So, excuse me. Um, so I know you guys are pretty busy with your lives, and I'm curious to how your lives are like beyond the internet and how you spend your time offline.
Yeah, so for me, basically, I am such a nerd, TBH. Especially during quarantine, I've gotten really into things like solving like puzzle hunts, which are basically people write like little like riddles that like link up with each other, and you can like start at one and try to go to the last one. So I've been doing that. Also playing a lot of board games and like Dungeons and Dragons. So those are things that I used to play as well, but wouldn't play as much. And now that things are virtual, it's actually easier, in my opinion, for some of my friend groups to be like, let's play like this board game, let's play this social deception game. I've been doing that. Pre-quarantine, I really love to travel, but that's something obviously that I don't do nowadays. And I also pre-quarantine, I love bubble tea. That's also something that I haven't had in a while. So I think A+ for my health and not so good for my personal obsession with bubble tea. But yeah, besides those, I also really like running. That's something that I have kept up despite, based in California. I have a treadmill in my basement. So despite all of the, lockdowns and the fires and all everything else, I've been able to run every day in my treadmill, because even if it's like smoky outside, my treadmill in my basement still works. So I've been really grateful. And that's, I think, my favorite quarantine purchase, actually, because I bought it 2 weeks into quarantine, even though my mom, I remember, like was like, like after quarantine, like, it'll be over in a couple of weeks, you'll never need to use it. And now here we are like 9 months later. So I had the last laugh, I guess. But yeah, those are some of my favorite activities to do outside of social media.
So outside of social media, I guess what takes up most of my time is work. But beyond that, it would be like just catching up with friends virtually. I also currently am trying to learn how to monetize my social media channels and really turn that into a brand and a business that I can work with. And also quarantine hobby, I started drawing a lot more. I did that a lot as a kid, but yeah, now I'm like trying out watercolor as well, which is actually a lot easier than you would think. And otherwise, in terms of exercise, it's just K-pop. I'm not a runner. I don't have the stamina for that. So I just do dancing, and my dance group at school, we've actually moved onto a virtual like platform. So it's really interesting editing the videos and having everyone dancing side by side, even though we're all around the world at the moment.
Yeah, I really love those. And I think what I like most about you two is how you're able to really have fun with fashion and these other extracurriculars that you do outside of school, but you're able to do school as well. And I think that one of the misconceptions with fashion is that beauty and fashion and intelligence can't coexist. And it's obviously not true, but it's definitely been so ingrained with us. So do you just want to speak with us a little bit about how you've been able to manage school and fashion?
So I haven't had a lot of experience in that field yet because, as I said, I only got into this during quarantine. So it's going to be interesting going back to school next year, which is why I am trying to rethink my brand, and I'm trying to go into YouTube and start vlogs because that would require me to do less things outside of what I would usually do. But in terms of balance, like at school, I definitely am not nicely dressed all the time. As Madeline said earlier, you know, you're just in career fair shirts, and like I'm always in sweats, and sometimes I go days without washing my hair, which is kind of gross. But you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. But yeah, definitely during the weekend as like a treat, you should, you know, if it makes you feel good, dress up, take some pictures. It's easy, you know, especially now. In the past, I was also a big traveler as well. And for my Instagram, I always wanted to post things where I was traveling or where I was somewhere special. But now because of quarantine, I'm always at home. So it's become a lot more low maintenance as well. I just take a photo in the corner of my room and I post it.
Yeah, I definitely feel that a lot with regards to traveling and things like that and posting. Because similarly, I guess before quarantine, really, I would try to post only if I was traveling or if there's like something really special. And now because no traveling and nothing really special, I just kind of just like post random stuff. I also bought what's it called? Sorry, like a tripod during quarantine. So that's actually I think been a time saver because before I would have to always like wait until I was with a friend or something, be like, oh, like, can you take my photo? And now I can just like do it myself. And again, like Erica mentioned, I can do it like in my room, my backyard. I don't have to like go anywhere special because there's nowhere to go nowadays. And in terms of time management in general, I don't think I spend as much time as on social media as some people because I try to limit the amount of time I spend. So I post like, I don't know if it's too much or too little or too much, but I post once a week, which is definitely lesser cadence than some of my fellow people on social media. And I try to not like scroll too much, I guess. So because I want to be able to sometimes like take a break and like take a breather, because I do think that social media, even though it's a great platform, does have some adverse effects if you use it for too long, I guess. And yeah, in terms of time management in general, I really personally like using Asana, which is like a task manager. So I use it not just for like work, but also just in general. Like if I have like particular tasks I need to get done in my personal life, I'll like put that on and check it. And I think Google Calendar is something that is really useful as well for time management. So yeah, those are two of the things that I personally use for keeping track of my time. And I think going forward, I think what I'll try to do, I'm not too sure what I want to do with social media. Like I haven't really monetized that much. So I think I'll see what happens with time. And I think I'll definitely have to reevaluate once quarantine is over, because part of the reason why I started posting more consistently and more consistently STEM content was because of quarantine and because I had more time during quarantine. And I anticipate that will probably be not the case once quarantine ends.
Yeah, I think that's definitely great. I know that during quarantine, I've been able to like explore new interests, and I think that's one of the benefits that comes out of it. And now just kind of moving a bit forward. So since you are both involved in STEM and fashion, like how have you found ways to integrate the two, and how do you recommend or how do you encourage people like us in like high school and still exploring our interests? How can we do the same?
Like I mentioned previously, there are some pretty cool accounts, probably on other platforms as well, but specifically on Instagram, where it's STEM content creators also creating their own merchandise. And for example, like I mentioned, I think Coding Crystals and Fern Suli, I would definitely recommend supporting those people as well, because I think that it's a great cause, and it's also supporting like women of color who have STEM shops on Instagram. So I think that's an excellent cause. And I think in general, being just informed in the industry and being aware of some of the discrimination that happens is something, not just specific to fashion, but in general is something that I'd recommend just keeping an eye out on, because you know, as like women, as people of color in STEM, there are going to be some adversity that you probably would have to overcome, and just being aware of it and being able to speak out about it when you see it is something that is important, I think, in making sure the industry, the STEM industry, progresses further forward, which I believe it is doing in a good way right now.
Could you actually repeat that question?
Yeah, sure. So the question was, how do you integrate fashion and STEM into your work, and how do you recommend people like us in high school of how we can do the same and like look for opportunities?
Okay, so I definitely feel like in high school, it is pretty important to concentrate more on your schoolwork, especially with college as well. But I think high school is also, what I wish I didn't do in high school was I was very scared to express myself, and I always tried following what others were wearing and how others were expressing themselves. And I was scared to step out of my comfort zone. And because of that, like my self-esteem was pretty low. I didn't feel confident wearing what I was trying to wear. So in terms of that, I think just be open to trying new things, and honestly, like don't follow the trend just because it's there, you know? And yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
So speaking of trends, where do you see the fashion industry moving in the future, and how might people's perceptions change towards it?
So I'd say in terms of the fashion industry, a trend that I've been observing is there's more and more niche markets. So I feel like that's a great opportunity for small businesses to come in, especially because people are becoming more conscious about where they want to purchase things and like sustainable fashion. So yeah, I think a lot more handmade, a lot more customization, and yeah, support small businesses. That's where I see it going.
That's really awesome. I would just like to, I would like to add, yeah, I also see it going in that direction. And I think specifically, I think DIY has been a really great thing that's been popping up. So for example, one of my favorite YouTubers is, her name is, sorry, April, but she goes by Coolerpa, and she does a lot of like thrift upcycling. And it's honestly so, what's the word, so satisfying to watch, even though I can't really do anything she does. But it's just like nice to watch. And she's also an Asian American woman as well. So that's like great representation, because I know the YouTube community is not, you know, as Erica mentioned, is dominated primarily by white content creators. So I definitely see DIY becoming a bigger thing. And like Erica said, like sustainable fashion as well. I think like, I feel like especially during the quarantine, I feel like stores like apps like Depop and Poshmark have been more, maybe it's just anecdotal, but I feel like me and a lot of my friends got it during quarantine. So I'm hoping that that trend stays and that people buy secondhand more often and upcycle and thrift more than they buy firsthand, and support sustainable fashion that way.
Actually, to reiterate, yeah, so I think also a big part of that is like, if you want to go into fashion, some people think you have to be wearing designer, you have to be getting new products. But as Madeline just pointed out, Depop is big, Poshmark is also huge. And I think like, you don't have to feel pressured to always be purchasing new things, to be purchasing the trendiest things. You can find just as like nice items on other websites for like a quarter of the price. And again, you can alter it. And at the end of the day, like once you alter it, it's custom to you and no one else has it and it fits you perfectly. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Erica, I love the way that you like take clothes and you like change them, and I think that's super cute. So I just wanted to say that. And just to end this off, so do you think that social media is something that you will continue with in the future, or do you think that it will shift towards some other platform? Do you see yourself on that?
For me, I think I do see myself staying on social media for the foreseeable future. I do think that, well, it honestly depends on my time commitments after quarantine, because as someone who was a student before quarantine and then during quarantine became like a full-time engineer, um, it's interesting because I was actually a lot more busy as a student, as I have like so much free time now, like not just because of quarantine and because there's nothing to do outside, but also just because I was like always swamped with work and hella busy during like MIT. And now like it's actually chill. Like I don't have to do anything work related after like 6 p.m. every day. So that's really nice. And weekends are just for me. So I personally, I can't say for sure what I will do after quarantine, but as of now, I do see myself staying in social media because I think that the work that I do, like the STEM outreach that I do via social media, is something that I genuinely like doing and that I hope to do in person once quarantine ends. So I am hopeful that I will continue, but it definitely depends on, to be honest, like time and what happens after quarantine.
Yeah, I would agree. So at the moment, I'm working. So on the weekends, I try to focus most of my content creation on the weekends, and I kind of just post it throughout the week. But once I go back to school, I already know that my weekends are just gonna be dedicated to homework. So I'm trying to gear my content towards vlogs, as I said, and hopefully things will work out for me. But I really do want to keep it going, especially because I've been able to meet a lot of cool people through Instagram and TikTok. So yeah, I really do like sharing content. I like sharing fashion and thrifting, flipping, but you know, time commitments will determine what actually happens.
Okay. Um, um, okay, so we have a couple questions from some of our attendees in the chat. Kelsey asked, have you ever been discriminated or belittled in the STEM field because you're a woman or person of color? And how do you deal with that or clap back with that?
I can start off this. So I feel like I've been really lucky in that I've never been discriminated against explicitly in STEM by other people in STEM, but I understand that's definitely not the case for everyone. So for context, like because I went to MIT and because I work at Google, I think generally, especially like my internships and when interacting with people who weren't MIT, they would assume that I was smart, even though like I'm not really that smart. But luckily, I think because of that, I have never had anyone talk down to me or like think that I knew less because of my gender. I will say that through Instagram, actually, I've been talking to a lot of other women who are also like software engineers in tech in STEM, and that's definitely not the case. So this is why I personally recognize, like, I'm really passionate about the need for STEM outreach and to show like the world that, you know, women engineers are equally as good, can do anything that a guy engineer can do. So yeah, luckily for me personally, has never happened explicitly in STEM, but unfortunately is a much too widespread issue in general. And I'll also say that some, I guess, belittlement I sometimes get is not from people in STEM, but people outside of STEM. Like, I think the classic, like, oh, like, you don't look like an engineer. I'm just like, what do you think an engineer is supposed to look like? That stuff gets pretty grating after sometimes. And I think oftentimes people don't realize it's insulting to like insinuate that women have to look a certain way to be an engineer, or to insinuate that women are not typical engineers, which is why they're surprised that I'm a woman in engineering. So I hope that I hope things will become more progressive in general and people will stop asking that, because I think that just undermines all women in STEM, and that's unfortunately a viewpoint that people don't see as insulting or as belittling, unfortunately, because yeah, I think people just have different viewpoints on this. So I'm hoping that things move forward and that's no longer an issue in the future.
So I don't think I've ever experienced discrimination explicitly either, but you know, I have joined kind of the social media circle very late. So maybe when I go back, you know, people might have things to say and I'll have to learn how to deal with that. But yes, I have gotten a lot of, oh, you don't seem like a STEM major. I thought you were like a business major. And I guess it's always nice to prove people wrong. But another thing that I think I struggle with is self-confidence when it comes to things. So I actually sometimes belittle myself, which isn't great. And I'm trying to learn how to express myself and come off more confident as well. I feel like women really need to do that. So for example, certain phrases like, oh, I'll try to do that. Don't do that. Say, I'll see what I can do about that. You have to assert that dominance that the men do. The men do. So that's what I'm currently working on, especially as I continue work in the STEM field, and hopefully going back, it won't be too bad.
So our next question is for Maddie. Someone asked, what kind of work do you do at Google?
Yeah, so I'm a software engineer at Google. I work on Google Health, and I'm on one of the consumer teams. So it's called Screeners and Actions. Basically, we make like medical surveys that people can take before they go see the doctor to determine like what kind of treatment, or to like suggest them toward what kind of treatment they should be looking for based on their symptoms. And that's like embedded into Google search as well. So that's essentially what I do. And specifically, I do full stack. So I use a lot of Java and TypeScript and a lot of internal Google libraries to do this. Also unrelated to that question, but I just want to say thank you to Erica for bringing up the self-confidence thing. I feel pretty strongly about this because imposter syndrome is something that I've struggled with for so long. Like even I guess before going to university, but just in general, like my self-confidence has never and probably won't be too good for a very long time. But I definitely agree that oftentimes the greatest critic to myself, for me, is myself. And I'm trying my best to work on that, but it definitely is hard. And I want to emphasize that if you do feel imposter syndrome, or which is essentially like if you feel like you don't belong at a place, you feel like you're not good enough, I want to say that in my opinion, a lot of people do feel this, and it's hard to, it's like obviously easier to say this than to do it, but you really shouldn't, because something I've realized is that like, if everyone doesn't think they know what they're doing, it's actually that everyone does really know. Everyone is actually like very qualified. It's just that because of your own biases, because of, your own worldview, you think that you're not qualified. So that's all I can say. Like, imposter syndrome sucks, but it's a very real problem for people, including me. But if you change your mindset, potentially it might be a bit easier to overcome that. I still haven't figured it out, but hopefully that will work for you.
You end up realizing everyone has imposter syndrome, basically. So basically, no one has it.